In this video, I will introduce the 47th President of the White House. At the beginning of the video, we'll look at some interesting food-related stories. During the over 200-year history of the White House, a symbol of pride in American politics, many strange rules have existed. One of them was the tradition of supporters gifting cheese to the president. This food, which represented the culinary culture of rural America in the 19th century, was considered a deep blessing from farmers to the country's leader. So in terms of meaning, it was quite noble. But the problem was that everyone wanted to compare. Each donor hoped their cheese would become the most special gift in history. So, from the time of the third president, Thomas Jefferson, this somewhat ceremonial tradition gradually became excessive. The most extreme example occurred in 1835 during the term of the seventh president, Andrew Jackson, when a cheesemaker from Oswego County, New York, named Thomas Meacham, delivered a mountain of cheese weighing over 800 pounds, more than 360 kilograms, directly to the White House. Faced with such a massive gift, President Jackson, who was gifted in both military and political fields, found himself helpless, unsure of what to do. Eventually, he placed it inside the White House and tried to handle the situation in several ways. For example, during a national event celebrating victory at the Battle of Wallenstein, he served the cheese to tens of thousands of guests. But even after all that, the mountain of cheese remained. At a loss, and nearing the end of his term, Jackson decided to leave the problem to his successor, the eighth president, Martin Van Buren. But when Van Buren, a descendant of the Netherlands, the homeland of cheese, arrived at the White House, he was overwhelmed by a foul smell. After nearly 2 years of neglect, the massive cheese had become horribly rotten. Still, in order to respect the sentiment of the original gift, Van Buren quickly disposed of the remaining cheese and ordered the carpets cleaned, the curtains replaced, and the walls scrubbed to eliminate the lingering stench. After this event, the tradition of gifting cheese to the president was increasingly criticized as an outdated rural custom. With the ongoing urbanization of the United States and the shift from agriculture to industry, its original symbolic meaning faded. Since the time of the 15th president, James Buchanan, the White House has never again received that damned cheese. Among the ceremonial stories passed down from the White House, I personally find the turkey pardon tradition to be one of the most interesting. The tradition of gifting turkeys to the president before Thanksgiving, much like the cheese gifts during Jefferson's era, dates back to 19th century customs. And the very first pardon can be traced back to one of the most beloved presidents in American history, Abraham Lincoln. In 1863, during the brutal years of the Civil War, Lincoln's second son, 10-year-old Tad Lincoln, happened to see a turkey that was about to be slaughtered. Perhaps the size of the bird aroused the boy's curiosity. Over the next few days, whenever he had free time, Tad would feed the turkey. He even visited it in the morning and evening and casually named it Jack. But, as you know, animal protection movements didn't exist back then. Only as productivity and living standards rose did Western society start to think about animals as more than just food. Yet in the midst of war and political stress, Lincoln chose to indulge his son's compassion. And so, Jack the turkey was spared, and even joined military parades with the president. However, this warm family gesture was more of a coincidence. It wasn't until 100 years later, during the term of the 35th president, John F. Kennedy, that the first official turkey pardon took place. During Kennedy's time in office, the National Turkey Federation would present a plump turkey to the White House every year for Thanksgiving dinner. That year, Kennedy received a 55-pound turkey from Minnesota. For publicity, the turkey even wore a small placard that read, "Good eating, Mr. President." But just as the press was ready to capture the moment, Kennedy, charismatic and forever iconic in American history, looked into the camera, smiled, and said, "Let's just keep him alive." The next day, major newspapers across the country ran the headline, "President Kennedy Pardons Turkey." The first article was published on the 19th of November, 1963. But just 3 days later, at 12:30 p.m. on November 22, fate wrote a tragic ending. While passing through Dallas in a motorcade, Kennedy was shot twice and killed instantly. The photo of the turkey resting peacefully on the White House lawn became one of the most symbolic images tied to Kennedy's final days. And that gentle smile he gave the turkey was later interpreted by many Americans as Kennedy saying goodbye to himself. To this day, among the 47 presidents who have lived in the White House, many have had unusual tastes in food. For example, the 33rd president, Harry Truman, only ate well-done steak and claimed that only grilled meat was real meat. The 36th president, Lyndon B. Johnson, refused to eat green beans with strings on them. The 41st president, George H.W. Bush, publicly declared in a media interview that he hated broccoli. But these were merely personal preferences regarding food. If we're talking about a president who actually elevated food policy to the level of state affairs, then we have to mention the 37th president, Richard Nixon, famous for the Watergate scandal. Early in his term, Nixon issued a strange rule in the White House kitchen. No soup was to be served at state banquets. According to one story, this happened in 1969 when Canadian Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau visited the United States and attended a White House banquet. During the meal, Nixon accidentally spilled a bowl of thick soup onto his clothes. Embarrassed and angered, the control-driven president banned soup from all future state dinners. Another version claims that Nixon believed state dinners were part of diplomatic affairs, and since no one cared about what soup was served, it only slowed the pace of the event and was unnecessary. Hence, it was removed. But if soup could be removed from the state banquet menu, then surely drinks must be taken seriously, right? Unfortunately, several presidents also attempted to ban alcohol from the White House. Chronologically, the first person to do so was Lucy Webb Hayes, the wife of the 19th president. Born into a religious family, she believed the White House should be a temple of morality, not a palace of alcohol. So she persuaded her husband, President Rutherford B. Hayes, to ban alcohol in the White House. He agreed. In spring 1877, the White House officially announced that all receptions, banquets, and gatherings would be alcohol-free. This marked the only complete prohibition in White House history. Lucy Hayes earned the nickname Lemonade Lucy. Half a century later, when the United States entered a 13-year era of nationwide prohibition, many newspapers recalled that the seed of the movement may have been planted in the hands of Mrs. Hayes. In comparison to the First Lady's prohibition movement of the 19th century, in the 20th century, the 39th president, Jimmy Carter, also launched a small ban on alcohol movement. When Carter took office in 1976, the country was still reeling from the Watergate scandal. Politics and the military were in turmoil, and public trust in the government was low. During his presidential campaign, Carter presented himself as humble, honest, and close to the people, and this image helped him win the presidency. Once in office, Carter emphasized personal discipline and frugality as the foundation for restoring America. He quickly ordered cost-cutting for White House banquets and banned the use of expensive wines. Instead, he suggested serving juice or non-alcoholic cocktails in place of champagne. One of the most famous moments occurred in 1979, during a meeting with Soviet Foreign Minister Andrei Gromyko. Gromyko, known for his expertise in international relations and state ceremonies, was also a seasoned drinker. Yet Carter insisted on toasting with orange juice. The American press dubbed it orange juice diplomacy, and the story spread quickly across the nation. However, outside the White House, Carter never used his presidential authority to force people to stop drinking by law or moral pressure. In fact, in 1978, he signed the so-called Home Brewing Act, which restored the legal right of Americans to brew their own beer. This seemingly simple law changed the future of American beer and even influenced global beer culture. It's no wonder that this long-lived statesman remains one of the most respected leaders in American politics.